Your governor, Kemp and Raffensperger, are doing everything possible to make 2024 difficult for Republicans to win. What are they doing? I don't know. They got something in mind, they got a little something in mind. Kemp is very bad for the Republican Party. He wouldn't do anything. We have Burt Jones over here. We have Burt Jones. All he wanted in the Senate was to have a special resolution passed, and it was all done. Every senator wanted it. Every Republican wanted it. And we have Senator Beach here someplace, too. Where is Senator Beach? Oh, I can't forget him. We can't forget him. A warrior, that, and many others in this group. But all they wanted was to have just a special. We want to go over the election. We want to look because there's too many things. And the governor wouldn't sign it. And I knew he would because I got him elected. I sent a young guy over to his office. Would you please have him sign this?
Listen up, folks. John speaking, everything just changed. At a Georgia rally meant to unify the party, Trump instead attacked fellow Republicans, including the governor and secretary of state, turning a critical event into a bitter airing of grievances. The self-inflicted disaster left strategists baffled and the crowd uncomfortable, squandering a key opportunity to reset the narrative. Donald Trump went to Georgia for what was supposed to be a standard political rally. He was there to push his message, to energize his supporters, and to lay out his vision for the economy and the future. And for the first few minutes, that's exactly what he did. He talked about economic policy, about jobs, about his vision for making things more affordable for American families.
And the kid came back, he said, sir, he won't sign. Of course he will. I got him elected, give me a break. Of course he will. No, he wouldn't. And then I said, well, go back over, tell him it's for me. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. They want to look into possible election fraud. Wouldn't you say, Senator, that's a good thing, right? They want to look into election fraud. Comes back, sir, I said it was for you. This was a few years later, after I won him the election. Don't forget, I endorsed him. And you had a very good man, Casey Cagle, your lieutenant governor. He was going to win easily. And David Perdue, where's David? I love David, but that was his only mistake. He said, sir, would you endorse a friend of mine, Brian Kemp? I said, who's Brian Kemp? He said, he's a friend of mine, sir. And Sonny came too. This was probably the only mistake of David's life. That was a beauty, David. Thanks, David, I appreciate it. And I endorsed this guy. He was like way down on the list. He was doing terribly. And he immediately, my endorsement means a lot, and I'm very careful with it. And I endorsed him, and he won in a landslide.
He hit the talking points that his team had carefully crafted. He touched on the issues that pollsters said voters cared about most. But then something shifted. The speech took a turn that no one in his inner circle could have prepared for. Instead of staying focused on the future, Trump veered off into familiar territory. Old grievances, old fights, old enemies who had crossed him years ago. And he didn't just mention them in passing. He went after them with the kind of venom that he usually reserves for his most bitter political opponents. But these weren't Democrats. These weren't members of the media who had wronged him. These were Georgia Republicans, his own people, the governor of the state, Brian Kemp, and the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Two men who had refused to help Trump overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia.
And then he said, I can't beat Stacey Abrams. I can't beat her. She's going to be too tough. And she felt that too, by the way. She still feels it. She's constantly saying she won the election. She can say it, but I'm not allowed to say it. I'm not allowed to say it. And Michaela, I love you, Michaela. I'm in love with Michaela. Please explain that to Melania. Please explain that to our First Lady. You're fantastic. No, you are a special person. But I endorsed him, and then she said, I can't beat Stacey Abrams. He said that, and his wife said it too. I said, well, you won the nomination, so let's do some big rallies. And I did them out at an airport, massive rallies, 55,000 and 52,000. There may have even been a third, I don't know. I remember two monster rallies. And I said, you're going to win. He said, I don't think so, sir. I said, no, you're going to win. I'm telling you, I can tell the vibe of the people. I'm like, I think, David, 287-0 in the last 12 months with endorsements. People respect my endorsement, and I respect them, and I love them. I love them.
And who had instead stood by the integrity of the state's election system. Two men who had done what they believed was their constitutional duty, even when it meant defying a president from their own party. And Trump was still furious about it. Years later, still unable to let it go. The Guardian and other outlets documented the speech thoroughly. What they found was a president who seemed incapable of staying on message, incapable of looking forward, incapable of doing the basic political work of unifying his party. Instead of talking about what he would do in his second term, instead of laying out a vision for the future that would inspire voters and bring the party together, Trump spent significant chunks of his speech relitigating the 2020 election.
So I did these two big rallies, and he won. He did win. He won by like 2%. And his wife looked at me and said, "Thank you, sir. We'll never, ever be able to repay you for what you did. You got my husband the nomination, and then we beat somebody who was unbeatable." You know, she was, in theory, unbeatable. She was the hottest politician in the country at the time. Democrat politician, I would say I was hotter because I was president. So I was hotter. No, I'm only kidding, Marjorie. I'm only kidding. Although maybe I'm not kidding, actually. No, she was like the hottest, certainly the hottest Democrat politician in the country. And she was going wild for years. She's still going wild. She can't even believe it. But I got him by doing massive rallies, and I really worked hard. He's the most disloyal guy I think I've ever seen. But think of the wife. "We can never repay you for what you've done, sir. We could have never won." And now she said 2 weeks ago that I will not endorse him because he hasn't earned my endorsement.
He attacked Kemp. He attacked Raffensperger. He brought up the infamous phone call where he had asked Raffensperger to find 11,780 votes, the exact number he needed to overturn the election results in Georgia. And when he mentioned that call, the crowd in Georgia did something that had to send chills down the spines of Trump's advisors. They booed. The audience, the very people Trump was supposedly there to energize, expressed their disapproval. They didn't cheer, they didn't applaud, they booed. And that moment, captured on video and reported by multiple outlets, told you everything you needed to know about the state of Trump's relationship with Georgia Republicans.
I haven't earned her endorsement. I have nothing to do with her. Somewhere he went bad. And you know what? Your numbers in Georgia are very average. Your crime numbers, your economic numbers, all of your numbers, you're very average. You can do a lot better, and you'll do a lot better with a better governor. You can do a lot better, just so you understand. But I don't want her endorsement. I don't want his endorsement. I just want them to do their job for Georgia. And you know what? He's the governor. He ought to support his Republican Party, because if he doesn't have his Republican Party, I could tell you where he came from, and it wasn't good. And you have a great leader of the Republican Party right here. Stand up, please. He has done an unbelievable job. And he has to work like hell with a governor that doesn't help him. And Raffensperger ought to make sure that the vote is honest. And they don't want the vote to be honest. In my opinion, they want us to lose. That's actually my opinion. And we can't let that happen, because if we lose Georgia, we lose the whole thing and our country goes to hell. Because we can't have her be president of the United States. She's grossly incompetent.
This wasn't a unified crowd cheering on their leader. This was a divided audience. Some still loyal to Trump, others clearly uncomfortable with his continued fixation on a lost election. Now, let's be clear about the significance of this moment. Georgia is not just any state. Georgia has become one of the most critical battlegrounds in American politics. It went Democratic in 2020, shocking Republicans across the country. It's a state that Republicans absolutely must win if they hope to be competitive in national elections. And Trump, the leader of the Republican Party, went to Georgia and spent his time attacking the state's Republican governor and secretary of state instead of trying to win them over. Instead of trying to unify the party, he deepened the divisions. Instead of trying to heal old wounds, he ripped them open again. Instead of looking forward, he looked backward. And the crowd's reaction told the story. The booing wasn't just about one moment. It was a sign that Trump's message, his constant relitigation of past grievances, his refusal to move on from 2020, is wearing thin even with some of his own supporters. The people who showed up to see him weren't there to hear him attack their governor. They were there to hear about the future. And when Trump gave them the past, they let him know they weren't happy about it. The reporting from credible outlets like The Guardian, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and local Georgia media WSB-TV all confirmed the same basic facts. Trump went to Georgia, talked about the economy, but then got sidetracked by his personal grievances. He attacked Kemp, he attacked Raffensperger, he brought up the 2020 election repeatedly. He was dismissive of affordability concerns, which is one of the biggest issues voters care about. There were documented questions about turnout, about whether the crowd size was what Trump expected, about whether his message was actually resonating with the people in the room. And the most telling moment came when Trump mentioned the infamous phone call and the crowd booed. That's not spin. That's not partisan commentary. That's what was documented and reported by multiple news organizations. Let's talk about the economic message for a moment, because that's a key part of what made this speech so problematic. Trump was supposed to be pushing his economic vision. He was supposed to be talking about how he would make things better for American families. And for a little while, he did. He touched on the economy, jobs, and his vision for growth. But then he started mocking the very idea of affordability. The Guardian reported that Trump scoffed at the idea of affordability, dismissed it almost as a joke. And here's why that matters. Affordability is one of the absolute biggest issues for voters right now. People are struggling with rent, food, healthcare, gas, everything. It's the top concern for families across the country. And Trump, the guy who needs to connect with those voters, who needs to show them he understands their struggles and has solutions, was dismissive of their concerns. That's not just a political mistake. That's a fundamental failure of empathy. When you're running for president or serving as president and you scoff at the things that keep people up at night, you're not going to win their votes. You're not going to build trust. You're not going to be seen as someone who understands their lives. And that's exactly what happened in Georgia. The turnout question is another piece of this puzzle that deserves attention. Multiple reports noted that there were questions about the size of the crowd at Trump's Georgia rally. Newsweek reported on a past Trump Georgia rally that was described as Trump's smallest crowd in Georgia since 2016. That's significant. Rally turnout is a measure of enthusiasm. It's a measure of whether people are excited about the candidate. It's a measure of whether the message is working. And if turnout is down, if the crowds are smaller than they used to be, that raises real questions about whether Trump's base is as energized as it once was. Maybe the constant attacks on fellow Republicans are wearing thin. Maybe the constant focus on the past is turning people off. Maybe voters are tired of the drama and want to hear about solutions. Whatever the reason, the documented questions about turnout are something that Trump's team cannot ignore. They're a warning sign. Now, let's step back and look at the bigger picture here. Because this Georgia rally is not an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern that has defined Trump's political career. Trump goes to a state, Trump attacks people. Trump relitigates old battles. Trump fails to stay focused on the future. And then his team is left to clean up the mess, to spin the speech, to try to convince people that what they just saw wasn't as bad as it looked. But the problem is that the pattern keeps repeating. And each time it does, the damage gets a little deeper. The divisions get a little wider. The party gets a little more fractured. And the voters who want to look forward, who want solutions to their problems, who are tired of the constant fighting, they start to tune out. They start to look elsewhere. And that's exactly what Trump's team should be worried about. Let's talk about Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger for a moment. Because understanding why Trump is so fixated on these two men is key to understanding the speech. These are Republicans who stood up to Trump when he tried to pressure them into overturning the 2020 election results. Kemp was the governor who certified the election results even when Trump was demanding that he find a way to overturn them. Raffensperger was the Secretary of State who refused Trump's request to find the 11,780 votes he needed. These men did their jobs. They followed the law. They upheld their oath to the Constitution. And for that, Trump has never forgiven them. Years later, he's still attacking them. Years later, he's still bringing up the election. Years later, he's still unable to move on. And when he attacked them in Georgia, he wasn't just attacking two individuals. He was attacking the entire Georgia Republican establishment. He was sending a message that loyalty to him matters more than loyalty to the law. He was sending a message that if you cross him, he will never forget it and he will never forgive it. And in a state like Georgia, where Republicans need to be united to win, that kind of message is poison. The booing, that moment when the crowd expressed its displeasure, that was the crowd telling Trump something. That was the crowd saying, we're tired of this. They weren't booing because they disagreed with Trump's economic message. They were booing because they wanted him to stop dwelling on the past and start talking about the future. They were booing because they wanted unity, not division. They were booing because they wanted to hear about solutions, not grievances. And Trump, whether he realized it or not, was losing them. Not completely. The base is still with him. But he was losing the ones in the middle, the ones who want the party to move on, the ones who understand that constantly attacking people from your own party is not a winning strategy. Those voters are critical in a state like Georgia, and Trump was pushing them away. Here's what the Georgia rally actually tells us about Trump's strategy and his approach going forward. First, Trump is still fighting battles from 2020. He hasn't moved on. He hasn't learned from the past. He's still consumed by anger about an election that happened years ago. And that anger is clouding his judgment and undermining his political effectiveness. Second, Trump is prioritizing his personal grievances over party unity. He could have used the Georgia rally to bring Republicans together. He could have used it to lay out a vision for the future. He could have used it to start healing the divisions within the party. Instead, he chose to attack fellow Republicans. Instead, he chose to deepen the divisions. Instead, he chose to focus on the past. That's not leadership. That's self-indulgence. Third, Trump's economic message is disconnected from what voters actually care about. He mocks affordability concerns. He dismisses the things that keep families up at night. He talks about the economy in abstract terms, while voters are struggling with concrete problems. That's not going to win them over. Fourth, there are documented questions about whether Trump's message is actually resonating with people. The turnout concerns, the crowd reactions, the booing, it all points to a candidate who is losing his connection with the very voters he needs to win. And here's the bottom line. Georgia matters. It matters because it's a battleground state. It matters because it's a state Republicans need to win. It matters because it's a state where voters are watching closely and making decisions about who they trust to lead them into the future. And when Trump goes to Georgia and gives a speech like this one, he's not just hurting himself. He's hurting the entire Republican Party. He's making it harder for Republicans to win in Georgia. He's making it harder for Republicans to unify. He's making it harder for Republicans to present a compelling alternative to the Democrats. And all because he can't let go of old grievances. All because he's still angry about 2020. All because he'd rather attack people from his own party than focus on winning. The Guardian's reporting on this speech is worth paying attention to because it documents exactly what Trump said, how he said it, and how the crowd reacted. The reporting shows that Trump was dismissive of affordability. The reporting shows that Trump attacked Kemp and Raffensperger. The reporting shows that Trump brought up the 2020 election repeatedly. The reporting shows that there were questions about turnout. The reporting shows that the crowd booed when Trump mentioned the phone call. This isn't a partisan hit piece. This is journalism documenting what actually happened. And what actually happened was not a good look for Trump. It was not a sign of a disciplined, focused, forward-looking campaign. It was a sign of a president still stuck in the past, still consumed by anger, still unable to do the basic political work of unifying his party and connecting with voters. The question for Republicans now is what they're going to do about it. Are they going to keep defending Trump no matter what he says or does? Are they going to keep pretending that this kind of behavior is acceptable? Or are they going to start pushing back, start demanding that he focus on the future, start holding him accountable for the damage he's doing to the party? Because if they don't, if they keep letting him get away with this, the damage is only going to get worse. The divisions are only going to get deeper. The party is only going to get more fractured. And the prospects for winning in 2026 and beyond are only going to get dimmer. This Georgia rally was a warning sign. It was a moment that should have made every Republican strategist stop and take notice. It was a demonstration of everything that's wrong with Trump's approach to politics. And if they ignore it, if they pretend it didn't happen, they're going to pay the price in the next election. The crowd booing was the most telling moment of the entire event. It was a spontaneous reaction, unfiltered, unscripted. It was the crowd telling Trump directly what they thought of his continued fixation on the past. And that reaction should be a wake-up call. It should tell Trump and his team that the old playbook isn't working anymore. That the constant grievances, the constant attacks, the constant refusal to move on, it's wearing thin. Even with his own supporters. Even in a state he desperately needs to win. That's not spin, that's not speculation. That's what actually happened. And understanding what actually happened is the key to understanding where this goes next. Trump will almost certainly keep attacking, keep grievance mongering, keep focusing on the past. That's who he is. That's what he does. But the question is whether voters will keep tolerating it, whether Republicans will keep enabling it, whether the party will keep letting him define its message. And the answer to those questions will determine whether Republicans can win in Georgia and other critical battleground states, or whether Trump's inability to move on from 2020 will doom the party to continued losses. Here's what Trump's Georgia speech shows us about his actual strategy. Trump is not focused on winning. Trump is focused on revenge. He's not focused on uniting the party. He's focused on punishing people who crossed him. He's not focused on the future. He's focused on the past. That's a recipe for disaster in any political context, but especially in a battleground state like Georgia, where every vote counts and every message matters. The Republicans who want to win in Georgia need a leader who can bring the party together, who can offer a compelling vision for the future, who can connect with voters on the issues they care about. And what they got from Trump's Georgia rally was the exact opposite. They got division, they got grievance, they got a leader so consumed by his own grudges that he couldn't see the damage he was doing. That's not just a political problem, that's a leadership problem. And until Trump addresses it, until he changes his approach, the problem is only going to get worse. Next time we look at Trump's broader strategy in battleground states, we're going to examine whether this pattern is sustainable. We're going to look at whether Trump can actually win states like Georgia when he keeps attacking the very people he needs to win over. We're going to look at whether Republicans can successfully distance themselves from Trump's grievances, or whether they're going to be dragged down with him. And we're going to look at what the long-term consequences of Trump's approach will be for the Republican Party and for American politics more broadly. Because understanding Trump's pattern, understanding how it plays out in states like Georgia is crucial to understanding whether he can actually succeed or whether his own flaws are going to make him a liability for the party. And Georgia, with its crowds and its boos and its documented concerns about turnout and message, is the perfect case study for understanding exactly what that means.